Well, thanks for having me and keeping me up past my bedtime. Today, I am going to be talking about pair presenting at conferences or meetups, actually anywhere that you want to pair present. I'm going to talk about what I've learned, what I love about it, and maybe a few war stories as well. Hopefully there's something, I don't think there will be time at the end, but if you think of anything, I'm pretty keen to hear your take, particularly if you've seen really good or really bad pair presentations. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Selena. I'm a Kiwi. I'm from New Zealand. Woo! My background is hospitality management. Some of you might have heard some story about this. I don't know. But at about 27, I started teaching myself to code, and I got a lot of support from friends who helped me transform my life. Now I'm a tech lead at Fresho. Ooh, Fresho. Thank you. I'm living right here in Melbourne. I'm also a recent state champion kickboxer, and I travel the world speaking at tech conferences. Woo! But I probably wouldn't have got that far without the power of collaboration and working closely with other people. So when it comes to speaking at tech conferences, I've had the privilege, or the opposite of that, I don't know, of partnering with my friend Michael, who's here tonight. You probably already know so much about him. He's been around a while. Seasoned software engineer, over 20 years of experience, father of 4, blah, blah, blah. We met while working together at Fresho, and we kind of discovered we had this shared interest in public speaking. And it all started when I tagged along to this local Ruby meetup. Actually, this meetup, Roro. Woo! It's way back when we used to be at Zendesk and we had like 70 people. It's great. And talks ran on time. That was cool. Anyway, one day we both decided to give talks on the same day. Actually, I decided to give a talk, and Michael decided he had to upstage me, so he decided to give a talk on the same day as well. I'm surprised he's not on the lineup tonight. I guess there's no time. It's not going to stop. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. You should be sorry. Anyway, since then, Michael and I have done all these talks together all over the world. We've mostly been known for 10x teamwork through pair programming. Woo! Which we've probably presented around 10 times. I don't know. Still in pretty high demand. We use this kind of combination of like real life skits and demonstrations to get engagement from the audience and shed light on the benefits and challenges of pair programming. And while we tackle some technical aspects, we also address really important topics like gender bias, which I've personally encountered so many times within the software engineering industry community. Not this one. The Ruby community is pretty good. There was this one time at a meetup actually, Ruby meetup. I was at a Ruby meetup, and this guy comes in and he goes, shakes my hand. Are you a designer? True story. Like, why would I be at a Ruby meetup if I was a designer? But anyway, there you go. While that presentation that I just talked about emphasizes soft skills, we recently wanted to demonstrate our technical expertise because we're not just a pair of clowns. So we built a kickboxing robot for Ruby Kagi in Japan earlier this year with a quote Rube Goldberg amount of hardware-based live demos. That was pretty fun. So anyway, it's just me kind of crapping on about how awesome I am. But why do Michael and I talk together? Why do we do that? Well, loads of people, in fact, most people, go out on their own to present, and for the most part, they do a really great job, right? So why don't I just do that as well? Well, there's a few reasons. First, I'm really pro pairing. For the last 6 years at Fresho, I've worked in a 100% pair programming capacity, and that's how Michael and I started working together as well. But pairing doesn't just apply to programming. Like, I mean, half the time we're not even writing code, we're nutting things out, right? So what's it all about? Well, pairing is about collaboration, and it's based on the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So in reality, neither of us have been successful at writing talks on our own, as you're experiencing tonight. Yep. But Together, we seem unstoppable. And I don't know about any of you, but life is just way more fun with friends. But there's also another reason why I'll do it. So I could go, I could go around telling people that, oh, we need more diversity, and I could be complaining that my life is hard, or I got an unfair deal because I didn't have all these strong technical women role models to look up to when I was growing up. But it's not really going to help anyone or change anything. So what I want to do is I want to show people what it means to be diverse, to be equitable, to have equality of voice across the meetup. Yeah, like even slots. Oh, okay, we didn't get that one. It's right. That it's normal to see men and women working together with equal opportunities to lead and to speak and to be on stage at big technical events, or small ones as well. We're here, these, I don't know, is this recording? Yeah. Okay, I won't say that then. We're here and we belong here, just like everyone else who does have a bed. And with that, I'll just move on, because now I'm feeling flat. I'm sure a few people, maybe some of you, I don't know, are curious or thinking, well, it's a bit odd that I'm here discussing peer presenting, crapping on about diversity when, first of all, my peer isn't here. Well, he is, but he's not here. And second of all, my peer is this big, loud man with a beard who probably talks louder than everyone else in the room. So I thought it'd be interesting to discuss the dynamics there and what it's like from my perspective. And the first thing I want to talk about is equality versus equity. What does that mean? Well, this is a classic example that some of you might be familiar with already. You can see on the left that equality is all about equal treatment, irrespective of status or identity. Everyone just gets the same. But with equity, on the other hand, in some circumstances, people actually need to be treated differently in order to provide meaningful equality of opportunity. Another example that I'm sure many of us, men and women, and a whole range of other people from different backgrounds can relate to, takes place in the meeting room at work. We've probably all been in that situation where we say something in a meeting only to be ignored or shut down. Meanwhile, some other colleague shares the same opinion or idea and suddenly they're praised for their genius. So how can we achieve our fair share of equity in the meeting room? Well, the answer is through allies. And you have to kind of excuse me because this was originally written for a group of women, but I think it kind of applies to diversity from all kinds of backgrounds. So yeah, the answer is through allies, right? So for whatever reason, people tend to be more receptive when they hear the voices of other people who look and sound like them. But by finding true allies, they can really help promote our value and give us a stronger voice. So how do you know if you have an ally? Well, they not only back up your ideas, they also highlight your participation in generating the ideas in the first place. They help to advertise the value that you bring. And most of the time, our allies are still learning. So another way to identify them is that they're open and willing to improve the way that you're represented. And those are some work examples, but what about conference examples? Because that's the main thing I want to talk about, right? And this one's a bit more gender specific. When it comes to peer presenting, I like to consider what I refer to as the magician's assistant. What I mean by that is if you imagine a magic show, there's usually a main act, and he's usually a magician. And he's usually depicted with an assistant, a sexy dolled up woman in a revealing outfit whose main job is to help the magician prepare for their show and join them on stage, only to bring out props, set up equipment, help with tricks and illusions, maybe a bit of eye candy for the audience, And this is absolutely what we aim to avoid at all costs when we are peer presenting. I do not want to be the assistant. And maybe, Michael and I might be a bit more sensitive to the idea than others because we peer present so often. So we're always on the lookout and we're always interested to watch the dynamics of other peer presenters and understand what they do well, and in particular, other guy-girl combinations. There's one presentation in particular that really upsets us. It was at a local meetup, not this meetup, that's right, a different one. Anyway, there was a guy quite well known in a local JavaScript community decided to do a peer presentation with his friend, cool, a woman who was visiting from out of town. And we sat there, Michael and I, and we watched them set up. And it was really obvious the presentation was running off his machine because he did most of the setup and she kind of stood beside him. And then the presentation started off pretty well. She spoke first. That was cool. Nice. But a few minutes in, she was meant to do a demo and she had some complications because of the key mappings, on this guy's keyboard, and she didn't know where the code was running, so she couldn't quite get it up and running. So he immediately jumped in to take over and had it all up and running, handed it back to her. Okay, no worries, little hiccup. But then the same thing happened again a few minutes later, and this time he took over and he just did the whole demo himself and continued on the talk, and she eventually kind of just got awkward and sat down because obviously she didn't need to be there, so that was cool. Well, there's a number of things that are wrong with that picture. Well, first, the talk obviously didn't need two people. It wasn't designed that way. It's a one-person talk. And although it probably wasn't intentional, she was set up to fail and kind of look like an idiot. I mean, if you're going to invite your friend to come along, you could at least get them to set up, get them to set up, get them to have a run through of the demos that they're going to present, before they go ahead and do it in front of an audience. Another problem, majority of the audience actually didn't notice anything wrong with that picture. We talked to a few people afterwards and they were surprised to hear our interpretation. Like, what do you mean? This is just normal. That's what I see every day. So yeah, it kind of, this poorly prepared presentation really feeds people's unconscious bias about women and their coding or technical abilities. Unconscious bias. I feel like I'm crapping on to a room full of the wrong people, but it's cool. Unconscious bias is an interesting concept though. We all have these and they're undoubtedly really difficult to change. So even once you become aware that you've got them, it's so hard to change. But I believe that over time and through generations, as we continue to display enough strong examples of people who contradict these biases, we can change the perception of the masses and ultimately redefine today's stereotypes. And one way for us to help with that is by pair presenting as men and women who are perceived as equals to the audience. So how do we do that? The answer is, does anyone know the answer? Well, the answer is with a great deal of effort and no real measure of success at this stage. So in reality, we could be going to all this effort for nothing, but hopefully not. Some of the things we put a lot of thought into when we're peer presenting include stage positioning. So I'm always one step closer to the center of the stage and standing on a small step if there is one, because I'm a lot shorter and quieter and my microphone's adjusted so the level's a bit higher, so it sounds more like it looks like we're more even. We often take selfies with the audience, and you can see in that middle picture, like, Michael's way taller than me. So, I couldn't keep a straight face. But when we take selfies with the audience, Michael takes 2 steps back and I usually hold the camera now, because otherwise if he does it, that top one, he like takes up the whole picture. Like no one else is even in there, we think about spoken line, like how many spoken lines. So we don't split the lines 50-50. We actually we make a real effort so that I speak at least 60% of the time. Because again, like Michael's much louder than I am, and he's a man talking about tech. If we had a 50-50 split, it would seem like he probably spoke 60 or 70% of the time, and I kind of was just there as an assistant. We think about who writes the code during live demos as well. So I try to do more of the code, but it's a bit of a battle because Michael's a bit of a show off, But we do try to think about it. And we think about the characters and personas we play as well during our skits. So we often try to do something fun. Michael likes to joke, so he's a bit more of a kind of a clown. That potentially makes me look like a hard ass or a know-it-all, which has other negative implications for unconscious bias of women, but maybe you guys can tell me if that's how it comes across. I don't know. I mentioned it can be a lot of effort to consider all these factors when putting together a peer presentation. But there's a few other disadvantages that we could look at as well. First off, the time it takes to write the talk. Anyone who's written a conference talk before anyone who's written a conference talk or any talk that's like 30, 40, like a standard length talk. I have no idea what it is. They'll tell you anyway. It takes a lot of time. I've heard, or you can just get up there and start talking and see where it goes. But in general, it really does take a lot of time. I've heard people suggest approximately, 40 to 60 hours for a good talk. We don't have stats, but I suspect it actually takes longer to write a talk when you're peer presenting. And if you're both equally contributing because of all the effort involved in collaborating with other people. So anyone who's done peer programming, can be a real drain because you're in this constant negotiation. Same thing for peer presenting. And since, Michael and I are both pretty passionate, we've got really strong opinions, we find ourselves just in constant arguments. It's great. Another obvious issue is scheduling conflicts. Michael, as I'm pretty sure everyone knows, has a wife and 4 kids. And until recently, I was spending 20 hours a week training as a professional kickboxer. So, and we both have full-time jobs, which means it can be really hard to find time and sit down and work together. So those are some of the disadvantages with preparing for a conference talk. But when it comes to the conference itself, there are a few more disadvantages. I'm not really selling it, am I? Yeah. The biggest disadvantage for the conference itself is cost. So our companies have, times are tight these days. So our companies have a small learning budget that we can put towards travel for conferences. And some conferences will sponsor speakers, but many of them are community run, and they can't afford to bring international speakers, or they could only pay for one speaker. And, if we want to go to a lot of conferences or international conferences, that's, not cheap. And we live so far from America and Europe where all the big events are, and, we only make Australian dollars. I can tell you Australian dollars don't buy you a lot in Europe. Maybe I'm going to the wrong place, but anyway. So yeah, it really just limits us on which conferences we can attend. We can't just go anywhere every other day. And the final disadvantage I'm going to speak out about today is one that really irritates me. You'd be surprised how often we hear this assumption, but or maybe not. Maybe it's not that surprising. I don't know. I'm surprised. But when a man and a woman spend time together or work together on a hobby project, the general assumption is they must be married. Ugh. Isn't that crazy? 2023. I constantly have people at conferences asking me off to the side whether Michael is my husband or boyfriend. That really irritates me because, well, number one, I'm nobody's wife. Number two, it reflects obviously a larger societal problem that a man and a woman can't just be friends. It's really weird in tech as well, because I thought, tech and Ruby were like it's normal to just write code and nothing else. But anyway, it also kind of implies that the only reason I would even be at a developer conference is because my husband is there. Like, hello. And lastly, it's a bit of a weird assumption to hear from people because, well, you don't often assume that a sister and brother duo are married, no? Exactly. But it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Okay. There's a lot of advantages to pair programming as well. Pair presenting. There's advantages to pair programming too, but I'm talking about pair presenting. Actually, do you know what? A lot of the advantages are really similar to the advantages of pair programming, funnily enough. So when you come up with your topic and you're writing your talk, you get a much faster feedback loop, which is cool because you've got somebody else who's passionate about the project. They can provide a different perspective almost in real time. If they think that, you're going to talk too much about that, or you should make sentences a bit more succinct, then you get some feedback on that. Yeah, it's great. Having that extra person helps you to feel motivated and accountable as well, because now you've got someone else who you can't let down. And actually, sometimes it results in finishing a presentation with less stress. I haven't experienced that one yet, but but sometimes ahead of schedule. So ahead of schedule is always good. When it comes to the presentation itself, having somebody else with you on stage can be a real confidence boost, especially in circumstances where the crowd is kind of fading, So like at RailsConf 2019, we went over to Minneapolis. So we took this big flight over to America. It's our first international conference. We presented this 2-hour workshop on multi-layer outside in BDD. We had this packed room. It was great. We were like, oh my God, people want to hear this. This is so cool. But there was this kind of weird scheduling that happens at RailsConf, and they have 2-hour workshops running throughout the day, and then they've got 1-hour talks as well, or like 45-minute talks. So about 1 hour in, half the room just got up and left. Because another talk was starting, right? And so we were just like, what's going on? And we had to keep presenting. And it's so lucky that Michael was there as well, because I was probably going to stop. I don't know. I don't know what I was going to do at that stage. It was really disheartening. We've actually also received feedback about engagement from the audience. So it seems pretty clear that if we break up the talk with 2 different voices, then a wider range of people feel engaged by the content, and they can pay attention, more easily, find it easier to stay focused. We did a longer presentation earlier this year, like 1-hour time slots. And a lot of people were saying, after even hearing the really good speakers for 1 hour, it kind of just sounded like they were crapping on. What are we talking about? Advantages, right? So when you're attending a conference as a speaker, there's way more that happens than just giving a talk. There's also this huge opportunity to network. It's cool, new and interesting people from all over the world. But approaching people can be intimidating, because you might feel self-conscious, or you might overthink the way that they're going to judge you. You've got social anxiety, whatever. It can be hard to walk into a room full of people you don't know. Personally, I find it really difficult to approach people who I've never met before, and really difficult to start conversations, like even with people who I know really well. It's weird, maybe, I don't know. Having a friend with me not only helps to have more confidence walking into a room full of people I don't know, but also to just approach those people without having to worry, like if something was to happen, I know I would never end up just sitting in the corner by myself, because I've always got a friend who I can go and talk to. And, Michael, again, everyone probably already knows this, he's a big time social butterfly. So I get that kind of added benefit of being pulled into conversations I might not have had the courage to walk into on my own, which is cool. Another big advantage that I've noticed, I'm pulling the dark on here again. Another big advantage I've noticed is maybe an unfortunate one, but there is safety in numbers. We like to attend all of the social events, every single one of them, even the unofficial ones as well. I made that sound way more seedy than I intended, but a lot of those social events, they've got some drinking, some late nights, you're in a new city, some of these cities aren't necessarily super safe. And when we're in a different country, I can feel safe getting to and from those events because I brought a friend with me. And he's a massive dude. Sometimes Michael also acts like as a cock block. That's probably the unfortunate part, the fact that I even need one. I mentioned earlier that a lot of people make the assumption I'm a wife. Well, usually by the time we get to the after party, all the barriers have been broken down, and it's kind of common knowledge now that we're not married. Thank you. And maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal, but in my mind, it's just unprofessional to hit on conference attendees at a conference event, as it would be to hit on a workmate in the workplace. you don't do it, right? And I feel that it undermines my credibility. It invalidates the value of my presentation, and it implies again that maybe I'm just here as a piece of eye candy. It's kind of crappy. But anyway, enough on the sad stories. I've covered a lot of content, short amount of time. Hope you enjoyed some of those stories. I also hope I haven't bored you with an ultra long presentation. But I also hope that I've helped raise some awareness about what it means to give peer presentations, and some of those key principles include, if you're going to do it, make sure you need 2 speakers. You know, give both speakers a purpose. Equity versus equality. So remember the difference. Equity takes into account people's disadvantages. To be equal, the softer spoken person needs to speak more or have their microphone jacked up. To be equal, the shorter person needs to be close to the audience or standing up on a stool. And to be equal, whoever might be perceived as the least technical person probably needs to write the live code, because it'll still seem like the other person did it anyway to the audience when you talk to them in half an hour. Ladies, there's not too many ladies here, but gentlemen as well, do not be the magician's assistant. It's just a bad look for everyone. It looks bad for you. It looks bad for your peer. It looks bad for the whole industry. It looks bad for just society in 2023. Just don't do it. Watch out for that. Unconscious bias is real, and this is only going to change slowly and over time. Guy-girl combo for the win, because it normalizes portraying people from diverse backgrounds as equals. Hopefully, I don't know, Ruby meetup, maybe we can have some more guy-girl combos. Woo. Conferences love live demos and live code. It's not specific to peer programming, peer presenting. Oh, you've done it to me now. It's just a fact. People love to see live code and live demos. And if we could see more women doing it, then that would also help to normalize seeing women as more technical on stage in front of people. We're all here. We're all equal. Michael and I believe in trying things, failing fast and learning often. So we are failure driven. You can find our past talks at failure-driven.com or on YouTube. Next up for us, we're going to be heading off to RubyConf Thailand on Tuesday, I think. Yeah, really soon. Where we'll be presenting Ruby versus Kickboxer, talk that looks at all of the Rubies, how we use them to build a kickboxing robot. In November, we'll be in Athens, Greece. We finally got asked to keynote. Yes. We'll be doing a 10x your teamwork with peer programming. And in December, you'll finally get a chance to see us again right here in Melbourne at LastConf. Yes. You can see how great peer presentations run. Thanks for listening. Feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, or tell me about duo presentations that you've seen from other people or from us, and things that you liked or didn't like, or I don't know, are there some that you recommend I go and watch? That's all.
We have time for questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I don't know. I can't speak for everyone, but sure.
Yeah. I have multiple questions then.
Go on.
Have you ever presented with someone other than Michael before?
No.
Okay. So that removes my follow-up question, which was going to be, how did that change the dynamic or any of your approach? But maybe that could be a hypothetical. Would that change?
Well, if you want to do a peer presentation with somebody, you can volunteer. Now we can do it if you like. Another Ruby meetup. I think sound hesitant there. I think it would change the dynamic in a similar way to what happens when you pair program with different people. So every pair is a different dynamic.
That makes sense. Happy to do a talk about that. Hesitation wasn't that. Didn't quite expect that.
That's right.
Great.
Thank you.
I've also got a question. The magic assistant.
Yes.
Have you thought of actually you making it as a feature? So instead of women being an assistant, man being the assistant. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like flipping roles. So like, like in a way, because like in this assistant dynamic, the main kind of magician kind of have more stage presence. And so in a way, so Michael would be your assistant, but you would be the main character, right? So in a way, like putting you even more, like giving you more time.
Are you saying you'd like to see Michael in a bikini? No. That is interesting. That is a good question. But in general, we don't want to make anyone the magician's assistant. We don't want to downplay anyone. Like, I know sometimes Michael likes to have a joke and kind of be a clown, but at the same time, he, just like everyone else, wants to be taken seriously in his career. And so emphasizing that on anyone is possibly not going to reflect that well, especially in a public audience.
But why do you think it's a negative? Because it's not, it's like it's performance of presentation, right? Like it's like you work together, like as a pair, like like some dynamic. I'm thinking, it could be like presenting something, and Michael could be like asking you questions or like putting you just like, you forgot about that. Like, it's kind of like being this kind of maybe like devil advocate, but in a way, he just like could be like throwing questions at you. So he's like assistant, secondary role, but you could be like the one explaining to the Michael, right? So it's kind of, again, you are the like wiser role, which again gives you even more like power in that hand, like more confidence.
Yeah, that's an option that we could explore and see how Michael feels about that. I've got a response to you though.
I think what you've said is kind of interesting. I think we are not necessarily good enough actors to pull that off. So we fall into personas we can play. And the persona is I'm usually the Joker that's like can kind of build something beyond the dreams, and Selena's the like actually hear the practices for pairing or testing or whatever and applies those to me to kind of pull me in. But to go all out and say, right, let's try a persona that neither of us necessarily play well, one, the devil's advocate, etc. It'd be a lot more work for us, I think, because then it's just outside of our default character scope.
Yep.
So in a pair role, I guess I'm curious, is the dynamics of who you are as individuals, does that dictate a lot in how you sort of plan and prepare a presentation? Like, is that, like you were talking about personas and having, you're the larrikin, you were like more serious. I mean, does that feed into how you design a presentation? Or if you were trying to give just purely just a technical talk as opposed to part of a show-ish, right? Does that feed into how you sort of plan out the topics and how you would present those things?
I think the way that we've kind of come up with talks in the past is we think up a topic and then we kind of mull on it for a really long time. Like maybe it's just sitting around for a year or two. And then we kind of, I don't know, we kind of start putting it together. And then the first talk that we did really well as like a duo presentation was 10x pairing with 10x teamwork with pair programming. So some people might have seen that at RubyConf. And that's when we first realized that we needed to have characters or like personas or like some reason, so that it wasn't confusing for the audience. Like the storyline wasn't going to be confusing, and it was sort of like, Michael's a clown and Selena's just coming in, like trying to get going, and then eventually kind of our pairing turns around because we have this little retro and we kind of realize, the area of our ways and we start collaborating well together. And I think ever since then, we've sort of immediately gone, okay, well, what are the characters? Like as soon as we start writing the talk. So we've got this idea that's been mulling for ages, and then we kind of go, what are the characters? I'll say this, you say that. But then we kind of also look at each talk and go, what do we want the audience to take away from this? And that kind of also dictates it. So what's Ruby Kaigi. So we did this Ruby versus kickboxer talk, and we actually wanted to be taken a bit more seriously as like technical people in that talk, because we've been known for the clowns with the pairing, and we kind of wanted to showcase a bit more of technical skills. So we kind of, neither of us were really joking around. Like, we had jokes, you know, we joked with the audience, but we were both kind of more serious characters. I don't know if I'm answering your question or just rambling.
No, I get it. I get, as an example, so if you weren't gonna pair with Mike and say a different personality, yeah, I guess I'm just curious that, like, would that completely change the way you would approach developing material for a talk? Or I guess I'm just curious to how much of that presentation aspect it feeds into.
I'd say it would change it quite a lot, because Michael kind of likes to be the center of attention and, you know, say things that are funny or like engaging so that he can get that attention. He's like a bit of an attention seeker. Not to put too fine a point on it. And I'm a little bit more reserved until I'm around somebody like that, and then I've got like a little bit more energy because I can feed off that other energy as well. So if I was with another person who's also reserved, we'd probably just give really boring as fuck talks and everyone would be falling asleep.
I think to your original kind of question, if you were trying to do a technical talk, as Selena said, basically we need the reason why there's two people.
Yeah.
And actually Kaigi was the example where we said we just want to go to Japan. Right. So that was where we kind of like, okay, what could we present that they would consider technical enough, and how do we present it as two of us? And we could have done that talk. Either of us could have done as a solo talk.
That's right.
Really, there was no. It's not like.
Oh, except for when you've got the robot controlling on one side and then actually sparring with the robot on the other
There's
side.
a few. There are.
We could have got someone from the audience to do it.
There are a few bits in it that are kind of all engaging. That kind of feel like, oh yeah, clearly there was two people here thinking about how the hardware worked and how software worked, whatever. But you know, our most recent talk was at Copenhagen, a developer versus developer smackdown, where we compare different architectures, SQL versus NoSQL, tabs versus space, and microservices versus monoliths. And that's because we wanted that kind of a talk. We said, well, it clearly fits to have two people. Whereas some people say, oh, this is how I build microservices, this is why I build monoliths. But we said, right, this is the talk we can do. Pairing again, because pairing.
Yeah.
The testing one is kind of a little bit
Told you he was an attention seeker.
different. we but again, we bring it into, I'm trying to build this app, and Selena's like, well, hang on a second, let's take a test. Yeah, I'll shut up.
Yeah.
What's the process by which you get the sound levels right? So you have to like really pre-organize the conference, or you just trust the sound person, you say like, hey, can you just get it?
They're usually pretty good. The ones that we've been to, they do a test and they're like, oh no, you're quiet, we'll bump you up a bit. But we usually have a complicated setup as well. I don't know if anyone's ever seen us set up. We try to ask if we can get a spot that's right after a break, or like at a time where there's more time for us to set up. And then we try to also, you know, some conferences are a pain in the ass and they're like, oh no, just do the sound check like right before you go on. We go, no, we actually need to set up a lot of things. Can we do one a day in advance? So we kind of push for that. And then we know that the voice is not quite equal ordinarily, so we ask for that, because otherwise I sound like a mouse. Cool.
I guess, like, another question, like, what do you recommend, like, for people to start, like, to find a pair? What type of talk, and like length of the talk would you recommend, and would you recommend sticking to one pair for a year, for life, or possibly fun?
Well, I can only tell you from my experience, and I've just got one pair for life. One of us is going to die sooner than the other.
Well, so what, you're not going to pretend up.
AI will be advanced by then. No, firstly, we don't do this for a job, right? This is like extracurricular. We do this for fun. So you definitely want to find a pair who's fun to be around, who you're going to spend a lot of time with, you're going to get into arguments with. You potentially are going to have this period where you almost never talk to each other ever again in your life. And then that lasts for like 6 months. And then somewhere down the track, something changes and you start doing these conferences again. True story. So yeah, finding your pair, like I mean, me and Michael had been pair programming together for, I don't know, a year or two at Fresho before we started doing any talks. So we already had this really good dynamic of how to work together and how to do things. And we had a lot of fun at work and we had a lot of jokes. So finding, you kind of got to find your pair that way. You could try different pairs. Maybe that's one way to find your pair, is by going with this person and then this person and this person. In general, Michael and I have tried to, well, we've got failure driven, right? So we kind of got this brand out of it that doesn't, you can check out our website, but we don't really do anything. we just tell people we're co-founders of Failure Driven because it looks good on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's right. So and then for topics and like length of topics, so most conferences, they'll have slots that are between like 25 or 30 or 35 or 40 minutes. If you've got something that's around 30 minutes, then you can easily just adjust it for any of those slots if you wanted to do conferences. Obviously, meetups are a really good way to start as well, just to get some practice, get some feel from the audience, see what works, see what doesn't, before you go, on stage and potentially never get invited back again. We did actually do in Copenhagen this one really ruthless conference where what they do is they've got like this traffic light system. So for every talk, there's a box and this pile of green cards, orange cards, and red cards outside of the door. And everyone has to vote for whether they liked your talk. And if you get too many red cards, you're like blacklisted for life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, we didn't get red cards, so we got one, but we got a lot of greens. Okay.
But they literally, there's a lady who walks around, we've got the spreadsheet from all the talks, all the card counts for the last 10 years. Wow.
It's insane. So if you're going to go to conferences, you maybe want to like pick your conference, maybe start with a local conference. Some of the local ones, I think, what did I say? DDD Melbourne, they're really looking for like first-time conference speakers right now. So, if you want to do a local one, they're probably easier to get into because they're not paying for international speakers or whatever. Topics. The key thing, you can choose any topic that you like, but the key thing is, if you're going to have two people present, you've got to have a reason that there's two people. So it's got to be like some kind of back and forth dialogue, or like a Q&A, or like one person's trying to do this thing and the other person's got some answers that are going to help you with it. There's got to be a reason there's two people. Yep.
Sorry, just and on that one, like one of the examples we've seen is it was a standard talk, right? It was just two speakers. But what happened, and it just happened to be the wrong way around. The guy was running the presentation, he had the computer, so he had to unlock it for the female presenter. And halfway through, when she was to present some other topics, he literally kind of said, well, I get a drinks break now, as if that would kind of, if he didn't say that, it would have been fine, but because he said that, it just really turned it as if the only reason I have another speaker is so I can have a drink. And there was no instant dialogue between nothing. It was like he did 2 topics, she did 3 topics, he did 2 topics. It was just like you could have done the whole thing, but then by throwing in the I can have a drink break now is like
that's crazy.
So maybe don't do that kind of talk.
Yeah, no, for sure. But if you've got any women colleagues or like women who you're friends with, get them to do a talk with you. It's a great way to like boost some of those people who don't often get a spot on the stage.
Michael, what you're saying, you don't like when presenters speak on other presenters, right?
We're failure driven because hopefully we're failing at something.
Fingers
I'm not
crossed.
telling you.
But did they run on time with their talk slot? All right, cool. Thank you.